Can you guys talk so I can get an idea of the sound again?
Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief at The Hill. Thank you for joining us for On the Record, our Newsmaker interview series. Today, we're joined by Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, Chair of the House Education and the Workforce Committee. As the new chair of the committee, we will talk about her priorities for the year ahead. She has been one of the most outspoken critics of President Biden's plan to forgive as much as $20,000 in federal student loan debt, and she has expressed her support for parents' rights and career and technical education while pushing back against teachers' unions. We will tackle these issues and more with Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, a Republican from North Carolina. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag The Hill Newsmakers. Welcome, Congresswoman Foxx.
Hi, Bob. Good to be with you.
I first want to ask you about big year ahead. You've got the gavel, as Speaker McCarthy has said. Even though you got a small majority, the gavels all come in the same size. So let's talk about both your legislative agenda as well as your oversight agenda.
Well, we have a lot of plans on both areas of our committee. We have education and we have workforce. So we will be doing legislative work on both sides. And then we'll be doing a tremendous amount of oversight, a lot of oversight.
Yes, you have said that Biden administration officials should invest in a parking space on Capitol Hill. Do you think they're going to do that? And explain that a little bit more.
Well, what that means is we're going to be bringing a lot of people from the various departments that who we have in our portfolio. That would be education, that would be labor, that would be health and human services, agriculture. There's one more I'm missing, but at least 4 departments. And we'll be asking them to come down to explain actions or inactions on their part.
Mm-hmm. How much cooperation did you get from the Biden administration in the last Congress as ranking member of the panel? A number of now chairmen who used to be ranking members said the cooperation was almost zero.
Yeah, well, I agree with my colleagues. Unfortunately, we got no responses from the letters that we sent, but as I've said before, I kept copies of those letters, so they've gone back to them. I did get a call from one of the cabinet secretaries. The tone of that call was much different from the tone of his call to me, another call we had when I was ranking member. So I think things have changed a lot in terms of their attitude. As you indicated at the beginning, our gavels are all the same size, and we're there with gavels. And so it does make a difference to them, I think. We can subpoena them if they don't come down and talk. We can subpoena information. We can hold depositions. There are a lot of things that we can do now to gather information. And our whole goal, Bob, is to gather information that the American people deserve to have. Under one-party rule in Congress, in Washington for the last 2 years, there's been no accountability, zero. There have been no hearings on the important things that have happened in the 2 committees I'm on. I'm on the Oversight Committee and on Education. There was absolutely no interest at all in the chairs of those committees in learning about how money was being spent, what the inadequacies were in the different departments. It's truly unfortunate because Republicans don't play that way. When we have a Republican administration, we question those people too. We report to the American people. As you will know, but maybe not all of your people who listen to this or watch this or read The Hill, is we're called the People's House. We're in the Constitution, we're Article 1 in the Constitution, meaning the founders wanted the Congress to be the most powerful branch of government. But unfortunately, Democrats have allowed Democrat presidents to take on more power than they deserve.
Well, as I mentioned in the intro, you've been critical of President Biden's student loan plan and his relief plan, which is now before the High Court. I believe that's going to be in late February. recently both the House voted and the Biden administration have acted to kind of end the COVID-19 emergency. But that's key, from what I understand, to their argument that there is still a COVID emergency, and that's why the student loan relief must go forward. What's your view, and what do you think the Supreme Court is going to decide on this case?
Well, I'll start with the last part of your question. I certainly hope that the Supreme Court will agree with us that what the Biden administration has done is totally illegal. The Biden administration does not have the authority under the bill that they're using to forgive what could amount to as much as $1 trillion in loans. Bob, it is wrong to ask people who never went to college or who went to college and paid their own debt or who didn't have any debt and worked their way through college like I did. It's wrong to ask them to pay for the debt of people who went to college and have the potential to really, really benefit from that. And that's exactly what the Biden administration is doing. The Democrats steal language all the time. Loan forgiveness sounds like, something really good. But what does that mean? The taxpayers of this country then eat that money. We then pay what those loans were. That is wrong. The Democrats always talk about fairness, fairness, fairness. Well, that is not fair in my book, because the people paying for the loans never got the benefit of what the loans did, which is give people an opportunity to make more money. Furthermore, a vast majority of the people, it's about 60%, I think. I didn't try to memorize numbers for this interview, but I think it's about 60% of the money that would be paid by the taxpayers was taken on by graduate students, lawyers, Wall Street people, doctors, dentists, those kind of people who certainly have the wherewithal to pay back their loans.
You have moved legislation already, even though the Congress has just got going. The House passed your Chance to Compete Act, which is really focuses on skills-based hiring reforms. This passed the House 422-2. You don't see that very often. Can you tell us a little bit about the bill, and also, do you think it can pass the Senate?
Well, I certainly hope it can pass the Senate. It is a bipartisan bill, as you noted from the vote. But what's happening in our culture, what was happening for 50 years, was people were being encouraged to go to college because that was the only pathway to a good life in this country. That isn't the only pathway to a good life. The pathway to a good life is to gain skills, find what it is you love to do, and do it well. And that's the pathway to a good life in our country. So what we're trying to do is to emphasize skill attainment and honoring people who have skills, but who don't necessarily have baccalaureate degrees. We've pushed too many people to go to school to get a baccalaureate degree, which is one of the reasons we have such a large debt. So the Chance to Compete bill says the federal government should, if you will, de-emphasize degrees and look for skills. So look for people you can hire who can do the job, whether that person has a baccalaureate degree or not. We don't have a study for the U.S. government, but my understanding is that Maryland did a study. Larry Hogan, who was the Republican governor, did a study, and about 40% of the jobs, I believe it was 40%. Again, I'm on shaky ground when I make those numbers. I think about 40% of the jobs don't really require a baccalaureate degree, but that was in the job description. Mm-hmm. We do know there are many, many jobs that say baccalaureate degree required when really there's no need for a degree.
The new Democratic leader, as you know, is Hakeem Jeffries, and I was interested that, in the past he's been pretty outspoken in support of charter schools. Do you think there could be some bipartisanship on that issue? Because, as you know, not all Democrats are in support of charter schools.
Well, that is absolutely true, and that's unfortunate. What we have found is many Democrats talk a good line about their support for charter schools, but then when it comes to voting for bills, they don't do it. Um, we just, we all ought to believe in education freedom, particularly minorities, because they are often the ones that are stuck in failing schools, and they want their children to get a good education. I want all children to get a good education, and the best way to ensure that is to have competition. My mind is blanking on a senator in the that represented Newark for a long time and was so pro charter schools. And once he got into the Senate, he sort of backed off of the issue of supporting charter schools. But, you know, it was African American mothers who initially got Ron DeSantis elected to the governorship in Florida because they wanted education freedom. And the person running against Ron DeSantis didn't support education freedom, even though he was an African American. And Ron DeSantis won the African American mother vote because they really want their children to get a good education. And they see charter schools and education freedom as a way to do that.
Well, what are your thoughts on this new technology, Chat GPT and AI, and how that factors into schools? It seems like this is a promising technology, but also it's also triggered some concerns.
Well, when I first learned about this a few weeks ago, and I was asked, I think by a reporter, I said, well, haven't fraternities and sororities always had old tests and old papers that they could present to people? And aren't, even in high school, I think people have been able to share information. So I'm not surprised that with technology, we have now this in AI. I mean, that's what we've assumed AI was going to do. But I think there are ways to figure out how to see whether a student has written the paper or whether the chat has done it for him or her. Technology is going to do great things, and sometimes it's going to do things we really don't want it to do, but we're stuck with it. I did hear actually a story on the radio this morning. I listen to WMAL when I'm in town. I'm in my apartment so little I don't have a TV, and I understand that they asked the chat to write a nice poem about President Trump, and it refused because it said it couldn't do it because it was politically neutral. But then when the chat was asked to write a poem about Biden, it wrote one with several stanzas, all very complimentary. So I really do wonder again, as we have wondered, as Republicans wonder and bring up the issues about social media being neutral. And it certainly didn't seem like the chat was neutral in that case. All Republicans ask for is that we have a neutral playing field, level playing field, treats everybody fair. But it'll be a challenge for teachers, I'm sure. You know, I taught for 15 years at Appalachian State University, and my students, for the most part, turned in okay papers. I did have one student one time, he was a senior actually, who brought a paper to me that was so bad. I said, look, it's going to get an F if you don't rewrite it. And I sent him back to the writing lab. Maybe we won't have too many like that, but hopefully students will know they need to learn to write and not rely on AI to do it for them.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It's been an intense couple of years with COVID-19. What are your takeaways? It's been such a polarizing time, and now we're getting back to life as somewhat normal, though COVID has changed so many things. But from an education standpoint, what have we learned? What do we need to do?
Well, we've learned that the teachers' unions did almost irreparable harm to children in schools by insisting that the schools stay closed. The students have lost a tremendous amount in terms of their learning. It will take years if they ever get it back. And now even Randy Weingarten has said, oh, they were wrong because of what's happened. COVID money, a lot of it's been wasted. It was given to the schools to help with learning loss. And I'd like to see that more spent on learning loss to do everything possible to help the students recover from it. But it is really going to be difficult for that to happen. And we've done the children who were in school a terrible disservice. And I shouldn't say we, I should say they did the children who were in school a terrible, terrible disservice by denying them the opportunity to be in school and to learn. And I hope at some point they'll be held accountable for that.
I came to Washington in 1995 covering the Labor Department. You've been critical of the Labor Department and Secretary Walsh, specifically on his involvement in collective bargaining battles. Is that going to be something that you're going to do oversight on?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I've met with Secretary Walsh. He's a pleasant person to be around, but I think he misreads his role. He's been on the picket lines when he should be a neutral observer. It's not appropriate for the Secretary of Labor to show up on picket lines. Again, he's not supposed to take sides in those situations. I'm very concerned about the NLRB and the work that it's doing. I'm worried about the department not holding union bosses accountable for the money that the hardworking union members give them. I'm not opposed to union members. I'm opposed to union bosses that abuse the money that's given to them by the hardworking members of the unions. And I'm concerned about Secretary Walsh's ability to be impartial because he has been so tied to the unions over the years. But as I said, he's a perfectly pleasant person to be around, and I hold no animus toward him or anybody else for that matter, but our philosophies certainly do differ.
You know, there's been so much emphasis and media attention on student loan relief, but as someone who's going to have 3 kids in college next year, what about the cost of college education? What can be done? It has really just skyrocketed in recent years.
Well, Bob, I'm going to give you a star for asking that question because that is really the root of the issue, and not enough people ask about it. You know, when the federal government has a blank checkbook or gives a blank check to colleges and universities, they have no reason at all to hold down the cost of education. And that's really what should be happening. People have read, you probably have done some stories on the high number of administrators that have been hired in colleges and universities and how college and university costs have gone up higher than even healthcare costs with inflation. So it's unnecessary that be done. They can sometimes blame it on the federal government and say it's because of rules and regulations. But the colleges and universities truly need to examine what they are doing. And we certainly want to hold them accountable for how they, again, are spending hard-working taxpayers' dollars. Because we have a small number of people in this country who can just write their own check for college and afford to take out 4 years or 6 years, and not 4 years anymore. Most students are not graduating before 6 years. But you will be seeing with our reform in higher ed that we will be focusing on the high cost of an education. There's a lot of things that can be done. You know, degrees can be compressed into less time. Students should be taking advantage of early college, going to community college to get some of their work done. But the early college movement is, I think, one of the better things that's happening in this country. And again, students doing dual enrollment, whatever you call it. But that's a way for parents to pay attention to that too. And parents should vote with their feet. They should help their students find schools that offer the programs that they need without having to pay $75,000 a year just for some prestige.
Sure.
Because I think you and I both know 5 years after somebody's graduated from college, maybe even sooner, Nobody cares where they went to school. They care what they can do and what their achievements have been.
Yeah, that's very true. My last question deals with President Biden. President Biden, I don't think it was a coincidence. After Republicans won back the House, he went to the border. He pivoted a bit on a couple policies on immigration. Do you think that Biden could pivot a little bit on education and labor issues, or do you think no, the Democratic Party is too tied to the teachers and the unions that you don't foresee that?
Well, I am always hopeful. I'm an optimist. I will tell you that we did the reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act when President Obama was in office and the Senate was a Democrat. Mm-hmm. So that was in 2014, 2015, 2013, those years. So we got a true reform of WIOA done during that time. I did see Secretary Cardona at prayer breakfast this morning, and we chatted a little bit about a couple of bills. One that we've already introduced this term called the Pell Act, which would do short-term Pell to help students get skills and then continue their education. He was very positive about it. My good friend Bobby Scott has been very positive about it. We think there are senators that could work with us on it. And Secretary Cardona said he would be talking to the White House. I don't think I'm saying anything out of school because he and I both want to see things get done, along with Bobby Scott. Bobby Scott and I get along very well. And all three of us want to help the American people. We want to help people who are looking for a good job, as I said, who don't necessarily need to get a baccalaureate degree. Bobby, I don't think, came from a working class background, but Secretary Cardona and I both did. And I think our hearts are with people like that. And we want to do good things. So I'll be an optimist. You know, my theme song is the song High Hopes. Mm-hmm. You may not be old enough to know that
I know.
song.
I've heard that one. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, in that song, there's a part that says, what makes that little old ant think she'll move a rubber tree plant? Anyone knows an ant can't move a rubber tree plant. But my husband said to me many years ago that I reminded him of a little ant because I take on impossible tasks. And I've been successful at some impossible physical tasks in my yard and on our farm where I've taken on some things. That's what prompted him to say it. I was doing some things he didn't think could be done. I had to be done by hand, no machine. Uh-huh. And so that's my theme song. I'm that little old ant. And if you'll remember, that ends with, oops, there goes another rubber tree plant. So sometimes ants can move rubber tree plants, and I'm out there trying to do the same thing with legislation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we've run out of time. Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, and I appreciate the fact that we've had to cancel this a couple of times and now finally got it done.
Oh, thanks for being flexible. Well, and that brings us to the end of our program. A big thank you to Rep. Virginia Foxx, Chair of the House Education and Workforce Committee, and to all of you for watching. Any of you, if you missed any of this part of this conversation, we'll have the video up on our website this afternoon on thehill.com. Have a great day.